Edgeport Airfield woke in cold silence, the morning light still veiled in mist. F-22 Raptors lined the runway like sleeping predators, their canopies catching fragments of red and blue haze drifting from ground beacons. Wind cut across the tarmac, sharp against the matte olive flight suit worn by the lone figure walking steadily down the concrete path. Her name was Quinn Callahan. Her long blonde hair was pulled back behind her shoulders, the ends catching light as they shifted with each step. Her boots were dusted from the lot behind the barracks, her pace unhurried, her expression unreadable. In her hand, she carried a clipboard rigid, plain, and filled with numbers she didn't need to double-check. From a nearby hangar, a group of cadets in crisp, light blue uniforms leaned against a tow cart, watching her approach with thinly veiled amusement. One of them tilted his head and called out, "Hey, Runway Barbie, lose your map." Another laughed and added, "She's probably looking for the admin tent." Quinn didn't respond. The clipboard slipped slightly in her grip, but she caught it without pause. Her fingers tightened around the metal clasp. She kept walking, her boots scuffing against the edge of a painted flight line. A gust of wind pushed at the front of her suit, but she didn't flinch or look back. She approached the command post, handed over her ID badge, and signed the log at the top of the sheet. The officer behind the desk glanced at her, puzzled, then looked down at the entry. Voluntary withdrawal. His brow furrowed, but he said nothing. Behind her, one of the cadets muttered, "Did she fail out?" The others chuckled. Quinn said nothing. She turned toward the exit, clipboard at her side, walking into the wind without a single word. The Edgeport gym looked more like a private dojo than a military facility. Polished hardwood floors gleamed under recessed lighting, and the mats were pristine, ringed by minimalist benches and chrome lockers. The walls bore the base insignia and framed photos of elite pilots mid-competition, always victorious, always male. Quinn Callahan entered quietly, her steps soft against the floor. She wore a plain white G, no patches, no rank. Her hair was tied back in a tight knot. As she bowed at the threshold, the air around her shifted. Every man in the room turned. On the wall near the entrance, a digital screen displayed the roster. A recent sign-up pulsed in green Callahan. Q. It was enough to make someone laugh, and someone did. Major Colton Lane, the class lead, stood in the center of the mat in a custom black GI with his name stitched in metallic thread. He read the new name aloud, like it was a prank entry. Callahan. Really? He squinted toward the door, then grinned when he saw her. Hope she brought her Barbie belt. Travis Reed, a younger cadet lounging near the gear rack, nearly choked on his protein shake. "No way she's serious," he said to the guy next to him. "Didn't she just quit the flight program? Is this her backup plan?" His voice carried across the room. "Hey, Quinn, you know this isn't a yoga class." "Right." She didn't answer. She walked toward the mat, pausing only to bow again before stepping into the training area. A low buzz of amusement circled the room. Phones were already out, held low but recording. One pilot performed an exaggerated bow in her direction, nearly falling over. Another picked up a spare white belt from the equipment shelf and tossed it toward her feet with a smirk. "You'll want this," he said. "We like our tourists to match." Major Lane circled toward her, hand on his hip. "You sure you're in the right place?" Callahan. "You know this isn't the self-defense seminar they run for spouses." His tone was light, but his eyes scanned the room for reactions. Laughter trickled out from the benches. Quinn didn't respond. She reached down, picked up the belt without comment, and folded it carefully before setting it aside. She adjusted the tie on her gi, then stood silently in the warm-up area. The mat beneath her feet was smooth and cold. Lane called everyone to circle up. "Let's make this fun," he said, stretching his arms. "We've got a special guest today. Quinn here's going to help me demo a few techniques. Don't worry, Callahan, I'll go easy." They stood in the center, and he gestured for her to face him. His expression was theatrical, his movements bigger than they needed to be. Every fall he gave her was exaggerated. He used her balance against her in a showy way that wasn't instructional, just performative. Each time she dropped to the mat, he looked around for laughter, and it came, always, in scattered bursts. Someone clipped the footage and posted it to the group chat before the demo ended. The caption read, "Pilot down." Again. Travis and another cadet laughed as they watched it loop. One leaned against the wall, muttering. She probably Googled how to tie that belt this morning. At the water station, Quinn stood quietly, filling a paper cup. Two officers passed by, not bothering to lower their voices. "What's she trying to prove that she's tough?" one said. "She looks like she wandered in from admin," his friend added, "or from a promo shoot." The mirrors along the wall reflected the entire class. Quinn's expression never changed. She moved with the same deliberate quiet as she had on the flight line. No reaction, no acknowledgement. Her face was calm, unreadable. The black belts lined along the rack glinted faintly in the light, a reminder of rank, of hierarchy. She had none. Lane announced pair drills and sent everyone to corners. He didn't assign Quinn a partner. Instead, he waved her to a small mat by the wall. "Stretch over there. Callahan, watch a few reps first. Maybe next class." The others took the cue. During each round, they glanced her way, made jokes, kept filming. Someone mimicked a high-pitched voice behind her back. Another did a clumsy pirouette. Travis made an exaggerated yikes face every time he looked her direction. Through it all, Quinn moved with practiced restraint. She bowed when others didn't. She folded her sleeves exactly twice. She never looked at her phone. She didn't speak. In the corner, someone whispered. "She doesn't even blink. Must be trying some Zen thing." The hour passed in slow humiliation. Not overt, but constant. Not cruel in isolation, but layered into everything around her. A mock gesture here, a thrown belt there. The tone was always light, always covered by grins and group dynamics. But the message was loud and clear. By the end of the session, she was still standing on the edge of the mat, alone. No one offered to shake her hand. No one invited her to spar. Major Lane gave a final nod toward the room. "Great work. Everyone, keep it sharp. And let's make sure we keep the mat focused. We're not here to play PR games." Quinn bowed. Her gi, blank and colorless, clung lightly to her shoulders in the air-conditioned room. She stepped off the mat and picked up the folded white belt. Her reflection passed across the glass door as she left. Silent, steady, and unbroken. The morning light crept through a narrow window in Quinn Callahan's apartment, casting soft gold across the hardwood floor. The space was quiet and bare, every item placed with deliberate care. A kettle sat cooling on the stove. A single plant reached toward the light. The bed was made so tightly the sheets barely creased. On a low shelf near the foot of the bed rested a folded white jai and, beside it, a faded black belt, the fabric worn soft at the edges. She moved slowly, barefoot, her footsteps muffled by the old rug. The apartment smelled faintly of tea and cedar wood. On the small desk near the window, a drawer sat slightly open. Inside were relics no one at Edgeport had ever seen. Medals, a few bent at the corners, newspaper clippings in Japanese and English, yellowing with time, and a photo, a younger Quinn standing on a polished dojo floor in Okinawa, bowing beside an elderly man with a shaved head and a fierce, kind gaze. They were barefoot, sweat-drenched, and calm. The man's hand rested gently on her shoulder. The caption on the back was written in tight, even script, Shihan Matsuda. Final test day. Her phone buzzed on the counter. Quinn picked it up without haste. A message preview lit the screen clips from last night's training, forwarded from the group chat. A snippet of Lane flipping her for the crowd, laughter layered over muted video. She tapped the volume down and watched the loop once, Then again. Her expression didn't shift. She set the phone face down. She crossed the room and picked up the G, folding it carefully along the seams. The black belt lay beside it. She ran her fingers along the length of it, brushing the threads where years of training had frayed the fabric. The ends were soft from repetition. The color dulled, but never faded. It held no patches, no embroidery, only the weight of time. Years ago, Quinn had stood on national stages. She had bowed before judges who didn't know her name and left with gold medals anyway. But after the scandal, the podiums disappeared. A sponsor, the father of a young fighter she defeated in a major qualifying round, had approached her with an offer step aside in the finals and secure a corporate contract. She refused. 2 weeks later, her name was dragged through forums, her footage pulled from event archives, and whispers followed her at every tournament. They said she used banned techniques, that she trained in secret styles, that her dojo wasn't properly registered. Her master, already in his 70s, refused to disown her. Sponsors pulled funding. Invitations stopped coming. She withdrew from competition, but not from practice. While the lights of the arena faded, the floor of the dojo remained, in Okinawa, under Shihan Matsuda's eye. She passed her final black belt exam in silence. No cameras, no ceremony. Just the sound of strikes on the mat and the stillness after each point. He tied the belt around her waist himself, then bowed once and said, "Keep it quiet, and keep it clean." Quinn set the folded GI down beside the belt. She opened the drawer and removed the photo, studying it with a stillness that didn't quite break into nostalgia. Her eyes traced the curve of the old man's smile, the background of tatami mats, the shadows on her own face. She placed the photo beside the belt. The medals remained hidden, the clippings untouched. These weren't trophies. They were reminders. Outside, a car passed, tires splashing through a puddle. Inside, Quinn took a breath and stood. Her hands rested at her sides, calm, ready. The dojo at Edgeport didn't know her story. They didn't need to, but the belt on her shelf did not need to be worn to speak for her. It had already said everything. The Edgeport Pilot Lounge looked more like a high-end airport club than a military facility. Floor-to-ceiling glass walls overlooked the runway. Leather chairs circled a sleek coffee bar. Screens on the walls streamed silent news, flight logs, and weather radar. In one corner, beside the entrance to the fitness wing, hung a digital bracket board announcing the upcoming martial arts showcase. Below it, a flyer read, "Open Demo. All base personnel. Welcome. Spectators encouraged." Guests include command officers and visiting family. It had been a quiet week until Travis Reed posted a photo to the class group chat. The image showed half a dozen cadets in black Gs, smiling, standing shoulder to shoulder on the dojo mat. Quinn had been cropped out of the frame entirely. His caption read, "The Dream Team minus background extras." The message spread quickly, reposted in 2 other base chats. Reactions were instant, laughing emojis, thumbs up, a gif of someone vanishing in a magic trick. Someone replied, "Still, too much white space." The next morning, the bracket board lit up with an update. The final slot, bold and blinking, now read, "Lane versus Callahan." A murmur rolled through the lounge like a passing current. A few pilots leaned in to check it was real. Someone called out across the coffee bar, "Did you see the new matchup? We're going to need popcorn for this one." Quinn arrived 10 minutes later, carrying her standard gym bag. She wore her olive flight jacket over black joggers, hair pulled back, headphones in. She paused in front of the bracket. Her face gave away nothing. She scanned the board, then stepped forward and signed her name with a blue stylus. The room quieted slightly, the sound of chatter dipping just long enough to register. A second lieutenant leaned toward his friend. "Guess she's asking for round 2. His friend snorted. "Bet she lasts 2 points. Tops." Major Lane walked by moments later, saw the signature, and grinned. If she wants an audience this time, he said loud enough for everyone nearby. She'll get one. Quinn didn't look at him. She tapped her ID at the locker entrance, pushed through the swinging door, and disappeared from sight. By afternoon, the bracket had been screenshotted and posted to every hallway display across base housing. A few reposted it to private social feeds. One cadet added the caption, "Should we call the medic now or after the demo?" A few replies questioned the pairing. One staff sergeant wrote, "Kinda feels like bullying at this point." But most comments were jokes. A few bets started in private messages how fast Lane would end it, whether Quinn would freeze in front of guests. In the gym locker room later that night, Quinn sat alone on a bench, unzipping her duffel. Her GI was folded precisely inside. She took out her black belt and ran her fingers over it once, then placed it back. She didn't change or warm up. She simply stood, returned the GI to the bag, zipped it, and walked to her locker. The room behind her echoed with voices. Laughter filtered from the weight area. The music was upbeat, careless. No one noticed her leave. Outside, the digital board still glowed against the lobby glass, Lane's name blazing in white, hers slightly dimmer beneath. A janitor paused his mop and looked at the bracket, then at her as she passed. He didn't say anything. Neither did she. Quinn crossed the tiled hallway and pushed out into the cold air. Night had settled over the airfield. The tarmac was dark except for the red wing lights of the F-22s, blinking in rhythm like a silent pulse. She walked across the lot alone, hands in her pockets, the gym bag hanging from one shoulder. The bracket was set. The audience had been invited. The story was already written, at least. They thought so. But Quinn hadn't entered to play her part. She entered because the moment had been handed to her, and she wasn't going to hand it back. Not this time. Not silently. Not again. The dojo had never looked so polished. Edgeport's showcase event transformed the training floor into a pristine arena. Banners hung along the back wall with the base insignia embroidered in gold thread. Mats were freshly laid, trimmed in crimson, and gleamed under soft spotlighting. Rows of folding chairs lined the perimeter, filled with officers in dress uniform, civilian guests, and a handful of visiting dignitaries. Children sat on laps, holding programs. Phones hovered discreetly above knees, already recording. At the far edge of the mat, Colton Lane adjusted the cuffs of his custom black guy, its sleeves adorned with sharp silver patches. His name shimmered above his heart, embroidered in clean, bold thread. He moved with exaggerated energy, throwing high kicks into the air, twisting his torso with loud exhales. Each motion punctuated the space like punctuation marks, deliberate, aggressive, meant to be watched. Travis Reed leaned forward from his seat at ringside, nudging a fellow cadet with his elbow. "She's going to cry in round 1, he whispered. The other cadet chuckled, eyes still on the mat. Bet she trips on her own belt. On cue, Quinn Callahan stepped through the side entrance. The room didn't hush, but the energy shifted. She walked slowly, respectfully, her bare feet soft against the floor. She wore a plain white G, clean and crisp but free of any insignia. No patches, no rank markings. Her blonde hair was tied back in a low knot, held in place by a narrow black ribbon. She didn't smile. She didn't look toward the crowd. She bowed once before stepping onto the mat. Murmurs rose from the rows behind her. A pilot's wife leaned toward her husband. "Is this real?" she asked. "Or for charity?" From somewhere along the back row, a faint sound played through a phone speaker. It was a clip the familiar words, "Runway Barbie," repeated with a laugh track. A few heads turned toward the noise, then quickly forward again. Lane made a show of cracking his neck and rolling his shoulders. "You ready for this?" he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Quinn gave no response. Her breath was slow and measured, her posture upright. Her feet rested lightly on the mat, grounded but poised. She didn't blink at the lights. She didn't acknowledge the crowd. She bowed again, this time facing her opponent. The center judge stepped forward, his voice low but clear. 3 rounds. Point scoring. Begin on my signal. He raised one hand between them. On the judge's platform, seated quietly behind a row of recorders, was Kenji Nakamura. His posture was still, his hands folded in his lap. His gaze never wavered from Quinn. At her second bow, he raised an eyebrow just slightly but said nothing. Spectators settled into their seats. Some checked that their cameras were rolling. Others leaned forward, waiting for what they assumed would be a brief exchange followed by polite applause. No one in the crowd spoke her name. They didn't need to. She was still the background figure to them, the admin dropout, the quiet anomaly placed beside a champion. No one expected her to win. No one expected her to move. But Quinn did move. Just a little. Just enough. Her shoulders dropped subtly, her weight shifting to the balls of her feet. Her hands floated into ready position. The black ribbon at the base of her neck fluttered once in the overhead air, then stilled. Lane stopped bouncing. His grin tightened. The judge dropped his hand. The match began. And for the first time that evening, the room went completely silent. The judge's hand dropped between them, and the room stilled. Colton Lane stepped forward first, shoulders loose, movements wide. He began circling Quinn, his feet loud on the mat, eyes darting from her face to the audience and back again. He was performing as much for them as for her. He bounced lightly on the balls of his feet, throwing mock punches in the air, his grin returning. The audience chuckled along, reassured by his bravado. Quinn didn't flinch. Her posture remained upright, her arms low and centered, her eyes focused only on Lane's core. She turned slowly as he circled, never rushing, never chasing. Her feet made no sound. Her GI moved only when she did, each shift small but exact. Lane threw the first real attack, an exaggerated feint followed by a fast jab toward her shoulder. Quinn stepped slightly to the side. The jab met empty space. He tried again, faster this time, aiming low. She pivoted, turning on her back foot, and avoided him again, without raising her arms. The audience murmured. Lane laughed loudly, turning toward the crowd with an exaggerated shrug. Someone in the front row whispered, "She's just running." Another voice added, "This is awkward." He advanced again, more forceful now, but Quinn gave him no openings. She wasn't running. She was drawing a pattern only she seemed to understand. Lane lunged again just as the judge called time. First round, no points. He looked annoyed. She looked unchanged. In the pause between rounds, Lane stretched his arms behind his head, pacing like a tiger waiting for a gate to open. Quinn stood still at her corner, breathing quietly. The ribbon at her nape fluttered once, then fell flat. She bowed again when summoned, the same precise angle as before, as the judge signaled, and round 2 began. Lane came faster this time, less show, more force. His stance was tighter. His eyes were locked on hers now, the audience momentarily forgotten. He darted in with a low hook to her ribs, and Quinn moved just slightly, just enough. She caught the rhythm of his weight with one hand, guided it past her center line, and pivoted smoothly, in a single, controlled motion. She redirected his energy and flipped him cleanly onto the mat. Gasps rose from the seats. Lane hit the floor hard enough to echo. The sound bounced off the high ceiling, amplifying the shock. For a full second, he stayed down, eyes blinking at the lights. Then he scrambled up, flushing, breathing heavier than before. The judge raised one hand. 1 point. Quinn bowed. The crowd sat straighter. Whispers began. In the third row, a young officer leaned toward his friend and said, "That didn't look like luck." A mother in the front row lowered her phone, her expression uncertain. Travis shifted in his seat, arms crossed, jaw tight. A cadet nearby murmured, "What just happened?" The tension shifted. This was no longer a joke. The judge reset them for round 3. Lane's chest rose and fell more quickly now. His stance wasn't as clean. He flexed his hands, bounced once, then charged. He didn't wait for rhythm. He didn't plan. He moved like a man trying to erase a moment. His right foot struck first, his weight behind it, aiming to close the gap with speed. But Quinn had already shifted. She moved like water slipping between stones. As his body leaned in, she stepped into him into the attack, not away from it, and drove her open palm forward with perfect precision. It struck the center of his chest. No extra force, no flourish, just a controlled, exact point of contact, clean as a snap of cloth in wind. Lane stumbled back 2 steps, breath gone, arms flailing to keep his balance. The audience froze. Phones stopped mid-recording. The judge raised his hand again. Match point. Silence fell over the dojo. Quinn bowed once, then turned back toward her corner, face calm, expression unchanged. Lane remained standing, but still. He didn't speak. Travis Reed sat motionless. He looked down, then looked again, as if trying to rewrite what he had just seen. Behind him, a group of cadets stared at the mat, unsure what to say. One pulled out his phone and tapped quickly. Moments later, a quiet voice broke the hush. "She's listed. Nationals. 2 years ago." Another cadet leaned over. "Check the Federation archives." Near the judge's table, Kenji Nakamura stood. The other officials looked toward him. He stepped forward slowly, then bowed low, deliberate, formal. "It is an honor," he said, voice quiet but firm, "to see you again." The room breathed in. Understanding settled like dust in sunlight. The group chat footage faded from memory. The jokes lost their meaning. The belt at her waist, the silence in her posture, the clarity in her movement, none of it had ever been accidental. It had been truth, worn without asking for approval. Quinn turned toward the judges. She bowed again. The same angle as before. Nothing added, nothing taken away. Then she stepped off the mat. The crowd didn't cheer. They didn't know how. No one had prepared them for reverence. All they could do was watch her leave. The locker room had changed. Hours ago. It had buzzed with energy boots stomping, voices rising, music humming against steel benches. Now, it echoed faintly with the sound of zippers and shuffling feet. No one spoke above a murmur. Most cadets kept their eyes low. A few sat quietly, bags at their feet, motionless as if still absorbing what they had witnessed. Quinn Callahan entered without announcement. Her steps were steady. She walked past the benches, her white GI still tied, the black ribbon trailing loosely behind her neck. She reached her locker, opened it, and retrieved her belt from the top shelf. It had been placed there earlier, folded and waiting. She held it in both hands, then tied it around her waist with calm precision, the knot sitting flat against her middle. To her left, Travis Reed fumbled with the strap on his duffel. He glanced up as she passed, his mouth half open, as though he wanted to speak. A question, an apology. He didn't get it out. She didn't pause. Her eyes didn't flick toward him. She walked past him like air. At the back bench, Major Colton Lane sat hunched forward, his hands still wrapped, the tape slightly frayed. The black GI he had worn lay folded beside him. His back was rigid, but his head was bowed. He didn't speak. His breath was quiet and uneven, not from pain, but from something else entirely. He didn't look up when Quinn walked by. He didn't have to. She felt the weight of his silence. That was enough. She reached into her locker again, pulled out her matte olive flight suit, and began to change. The belt came off last. She folded it with slow, practiced care, then folded the GI around it like fabric around a center of gravity. She zipped her suit high, brushing the collar smooth with her hand. The ribbon she had worn was tucked into the front pocket. No performance, no announcement, just preparation. The locker door closed with a soft click. She slung her gym bag over her shoulder, the folded GI in one arm, and turned toward the exit. Mason Briggs stood near the doorway. He wasn't leaning or fidgeting. He had been standing there, quietly, as if waiting for the right moment. When she approached, he stepped aside and pulled the door open for her. He didn't speak. She nodded once. He returned it. Nothing else passed between them. The hallway outside was cool and still. A few cadets stood along the wall, arms folded, watching her. No one joked. No one recorded. They simply stood as she passed, acknowledging her with silence more sincere than applause. There were no claps, no calls, no fanfare, just a shift in presence. A space opened around her, like respect carved out of the air. Quinn didn't break stride. She walked to the end of the corridor, stepped through the outer doors, and into the night. Outside, the base was quiet. The cold had returned. Red and blue haze drifted through the runway lights, casting low patterns on the concrete. The same path she had once walked under laughter now stretched open and clear. Her boots clicked softly as she crossed the tarmac. The gym bag bounced gently against her hip. The folded GI stayed cradled in her arm, still and warm against the cold. The silence followed her, not like a shadow, but like recognition. She didn't look back. There was nothing behind her that needed revisiting. The mat had spoken. The silence had held. The truth had stood still long enough for others to finally see it. The GI in her arms was not for display. It had never been. It was a record, a weight, a part of her that no longer needed defending. She carried it forward now not for them, but for herself. At the edge of the tarmac, her figure slipped into the mist of the hangar lights and disappeared into the quiet. No banners, no ceremony. Just the sound of her steps and the quiet that finally learned how to listen. Quinn Callahan was never looking for applause. She didn't step onto the mat to prove anything to others. She simply carried her truth forward, even when no one believed in it, even when they laughed. What they mistook for silence was discipline. What they saw as weakness was restraint. In a world that often rewards volume over substance, Quinn's quiet strength stood as a reminder that true power doesn't need permission to be real. It only needs to be steady, seen or unseen, doubted or dismissed. She never stopped being exactly who she was. If this story moved you, take a moment to reflect on where your own strength lies. Share your thoughts in the comments, or follow for more stories that honor quiet resilience and the dignity of standing firm in your own name.